Present. I'll call the Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, December 10th, 2019 to order. The first order of business on our agenda tonight is to approve the minutes of our two previous meetings, November 12th of 2019 and November 26th of 2019, copies of which are in the packets. Any revisions or corrections necessary to those minutes?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve from Nutting. Is there a second? Second by Lawrence. Members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, so both sets of minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action on the renewal of a license agreement with Windstream KDL LLC. You'll see a memo from the City Attorney's Office in the packets there with a copy of the agreement. This is essentially a renewal and a continuation of a access agreement that we've had in place for some time that appears to be working. We have the city attorney, though, with us if you have questions for her. But if not, absent that, is there a motion to approve the agreement? Motion by Lawrence. Is there a second by Martins? Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That item carries. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on approving a second amendment to purchase and development agreement with AGR Properties, Wausau Chemical. You've got some documentation in your packets for that as well. It appears that for the occupancy of their new facility and for the complete move-out of their old facility, we will again need to adjust the dates to our development agreement so that until Wausau Chemical is able to vacate those buildings that we'll be taking over when they relocate. You've got some documentation in the packets on that, and the owner of Wausau Chemical is in the room if you have questions for him. Go ahead, Mr. Nutting.
I was just wondering if they were finding anything out of the ordinary, or if this was all expected, just a routine thought.
Oh, Mr. Flashinsky, could you come up? Sure. Thank you.
Everything's going okay, I presume.
Yeah, it's obviously moving slower than we'd like, but it's progressing. We should be able to get an occupancy permit within the next couple of weeks. I'd like to close out and get the property to the city as soon as possible. We are moving on the Second Street properties. That I still don't think we have a closing date on that because it seems to keep creeping back day by day, but the second that's lined up, those properties will get moved over. Looking at the end of February is, the final hurrah. So.
Okay.
All
All right.
Thank you very much.
And with that, you've got documentation for the revision of the dates in your packets. Is there a motion then to approve those new dates?
I'll make that motion, please.
Motion by Nutting. Is there a second? Second by Lawrence. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries as well. Item number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding outsourcing school crossing guard services to all city management services and related sole source purchase of approximately $137,939 annually. If this seems a little bit like deja vu for anyone who's been here a while, it might be. You'll recall in 2011, the 2011-2012 school year, we were under contract with all city management for crossing guard services. However, there was much controversy surrounding that contract, and it was less about the contract than the process. And so you'll, this afternoon, the city attorney had emailed you all out some information from that time period, including her legal opinion and a copy of all the things, that minutes and whatnot that had happened back then. And I think the sticking point for the council back then when it withdrew from the contract was really the process that we used to get there. All of our standing committees and the council were outside the decision-making process. The contract was in place by the time we found out about it, and it essentially then basically relocated the employment of an entire class of employees with minimal communication to them as well. And so that caused a whole lot of consternation with the council, the committees, the public, the crossing guards, the schools, neighbors, you name it. So we withdrew from that contract, took that operation back in-house. However, that operation has continued to be very, very difficult to staff. It's been somewhat difficult to supervise. And so I would say a few months ago, Deputy Chief Barnes came to me and asked if we could talk about this again, if he could work with the school district on a partnership for the money, because obviously it's not any cheaper to do it this way. And I said if we would go through our committee structure and work something out with some partners, that we'd certainly be willing to talk about it and have a public discussion about it. So I have him here to walk us through the process that he's been going through to get where we're at today, and we'll have that discussion. I understand HR recommended approval last night,
Correct.
so welcome.
Well, thank you. Good evening, everyone. To your point, I'm not the smartest guy in the room all the time, but I knew to call you. I get to cop out of saying I wasn't involved in the decision-making the last time or the process, but I appreciate your guidance in identifying the committees to go through in a process. Additionally, I would just add that we bring the crossing guards together very minimally as a group for meetings. We usually do it twice a year. At the preschool meeting this year, the week before school started, with them all sat down, I was very transparent with them and said, we're having a difficult time continuing with the status quo and how we run crossing guards. There are lots of discussion as to possible alternatives, one of which would be to outsource it to a company. I wouldn't never suggest that they were all thrilled with that. However, they definitely appreciated being engaged in conversation and notified of our plans to move forward and look into that. So this should not be a surprise. I know that in early January at some point, we're hoping to bring them together for a mid-year meeting, which, depending on the decisions of the committees and the council, we'll again discuss what that looks like and potentially have all city management services be represented there to paint an accurate picture of what that might look like. So with that being said, I just want to highlight a couple points in the materials that I provided you, which last year was really, really, really hard for the police department to staff all the crossing guard intersections. And we employ 13 crossing guards on any given day at any time, both in the morning and in the evening. On 120 occasions, a little over 120 occasions last year, we had to staff those intersections with police officers, with parking control people, and a couple times we used our CSOs to do that. The struggle with that is the funding structure in which parking people should be paid out of the parking fund, not they're not being paid to do crossing guard services. And our police officers need to be on their sectors. Our parking people need to be enforcing parking ordinances during that period of time, not working the intersections crossing kids. This is imperative, which was a revelation to me in dealing with the schools on why this is so imperative to them to have these intersections. There's something called unusually hazardous roadways. How they measure that is beyond me, but the state does it and identifies based on traffic patterns. So for example, Statine Avenue, out on the west side by Statine School, is an unusually hazardous roadway because of the amount of traffic and the speeds on it. So we have a mobile home park that is right across the street from the school. And on any given year, there's 3 or 4 kids that go to school at Statine and they walk out of the park, cross the road, and then they're at the school. If we removed that crossing guard person, the school would have to bus those children across the street, as opposed to having them walk to school. So there's a significant financial impact to the school in having to have additional bus routes in order to meet the needs if we didn't have these crossing guards. When I met with the school and I'm like, we cannot provide you a service that we can't have people to do, and we can't continue with the status quo. They were gracious enough to offer to partner with us and seek through DPI opportunities to be able to levy for additional funds to partner with us and help us keep all the crossing guard locations, because that's to their benefit financially, and I think to our community to not have to bus kids across the road or 1 or 2 blocks. So that led us down the path and looking at how can we be comfortable that we're going to be able to staff these and really not have it be the burden on the police department. And the best solution we came up with was hiring this outside company. It's the only company I'm aware of that's doing business in the crossing guard business, that's their profession, and that sells that service in Wisconsin. There was another company, but they went out of business, and All City Management Services has taken over many of those communities. When All City Management Services was hired by the Wausau Police Department, we were the only city in Wisconsin that utilized their services. That is no longer the case. They've been doing business in Wisconsin since that time. If you look on your sole source, which is maybe a different agenda item, but it lists some testimonials from some of the police chiefs that we reached out to with communities that are using them and trying to verify that this company does what they say they're going to do. My communications with them have been very good. Some of my concerns were that we don't just transfer employment, that there be something in it for the employees. Every single crossing guard would be making more money per hour working for all city management services than they're currently making for the city of Wausau. It's not going to be a significant raise to each of them, but there would be a raise for each employee. That was important to me. All city management services is willing to and seeking to hire the entire staff that we currently have of crossing guards and employ them as long as they can pass their physical standard to make sure that they're capable of performing the crossing guard duties. They've identified, and at least in one of those testimonials, you'll see that there were some small issues with one of the communities where some of their elderly crossing guards didn't meet those minimum fitness standards and couldn't be employed with all city services. But the chief mentions that most likely they probably shouldn't have been performing that function anyway, and because of those issues. So the school came through and we saw what the initial estimate provided. We have not negotiated a contract with all city management services or fleshed out any of those details, but the rough cost was listed not to exceed $138,910 per year. And as you'll see, the city of Wausau in 2020 budgeted $94,910. And if the Wausau School District, which has levied $44,000 for this, that we would invoice for that, that leaves us with, I didn't do the math exactly here, but about $900 of surplus funds. So as far as the levy that we do to financial impact to the actual city budget, it's negligible. But obviously the residents of our community are being taxed through the school district to come up with the $44,000. But it allows us the opportunity to fully fund this change.
Okay. Thank you for that. I think it's important to recognize, too, our last experience with all city management was 7 years ago. And at the time, we were, like Matt said, the first community in Wisconsin they worked with. And at that time, there was some awkwardness, I guess, in the transition as well, because they were from California and they had never worked in a cold weather climate before. And it was simple things like the proper cold weather gear for the guards to wear was a hurdle that they had to clear. And so just based on just the process that we used and the difficulty with the transition, we had exited from that contract. But that said, if we could get some partnership from the school district, which we never had before, we were providing all of the service and bearing all of the cost, but not deriving any assistance or partnership. I think if we could create that partnership, and now we're going through the proper process, we're going through the HR committee, we're going through this committee, we're going to go through the council, not tonight, but in January, to make sure that we all have some time to digest this process and network with the public about it, we may hopefully maybe see a different outcome. I think that we've undertaken a way more transparent process with what they have going on now, and I think it's a discussion worth having. Early on, when we talked about this the last time in 2011, there was some talk about perhaps some savings in workers' compensation. There was some talk about a reduction in our liability exposure if we were not providing that service as a municipality, and instead contracting that out to someone who specializes in it. All of those things were valid points then, and I think they remain valid points now. And I was one of the I guess I would say, most vocal opponents of the process we used last time, just because of the way it all came together. But I think if we go through the proper process and we have these discussions, I certainly wouldn't be opposed to it if we can get those partnerships cultivated and negotiate the contract after we've made the decision, as we're making the decision, not negotiate the contract, execute the contract, and then tell us about it as an FYI, which is kind of what happened before. So thank you for bringing us in early on this whole thing. Linda?
Thank you. Two things. One is there any kind of written agreement with the school district to continue that contribution after 2020? And the second question is just about oversight by the police department or someone else for the level of service.
Sure, both valid questions. I don't have a memorandum of understanding at this time as far as longevity of their budget and what they're going to levy for. I think they're probably in the same boat that the council is, in that they have to approve their budget every year. I do recognize it is in their financial best interest to be able to continue with this process and with all city management services, assuming they do what they say they can do for us and provide a quality service, because the alternative is we would staff less intersections and they would have, their overall costs would increase. So I don't have tremendous concerns right now personally that the school district would do it for a year and then walk on their commitment to us. But I do think it would be appropriate to ask them for some type of written communication as we enter into a contract. I haven't had a conversation about the contract with all city management services, but I expect that it might be a multi-year contract, like give them 2 years and then we'll reevaluate and see if they're meeting our needs. And then the second question that you brought up was also brought up last night in Human Resources, which is the police department will still be the facilitator of the contract. Complaints from the community can still come to the police department. The schools that we partner with, which is where frequently those complaints go to, will still come back to us. And we will still have a relationship with, they'll have a crossing guard supervisor. It'll likely be the same supervisor that's Larry, who's there right now. And it's imperative to us as responsible for public safety that that's a significant part of it. It's the safety of our children. So we'll still be providing extra patrol in the areas of the schools and the crossing guards responding to their concerns, as well as it happens occasionally. We recognize behaviors or see things occurring, and our officers do, and we take action on that. So we'll still be providing oversight. We just won't be managing that process or responsible for the recruiting of new crossing guards to be able to fill those spots.
Okay. Anyone else have questions? Go ahead, Dennis.
When we have to dispatch an officer to man an intersection, and I've done that myself, is that because somebody calls in sick or somebody's unavailable or so on?
Yes, and there's a couple more yeses. And we experienced last year, full disclosure, this year has been pretty good so far, but we have enough staff right now to meet our need, but we have crossing guards that, honestly, if I can raise my right arm over my head when I'm their age, I'm going to put it in the victory column. And so we have people that suffer illness and they can't make it. We have people that, when they say, I can't be here for a week, we don't tell them you have to be because we know they'll leave. We have people that quit, so we have vacancy, illness, injury, hip replacements, knee replacements, and all those things. Any one of those issues opens up 2 shifts a day automatically for us, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. So last year we had occasions where we're 3 guards short. We can't find people to work on a substitute basis for that. So that's when it really negatively impacts our organization. So all the above.
All right. Well, if they're going to hire, they're going to try to hire the same people, are we going to have the same problems? And if we do, how are they going to address it any different than we address it?
One of the beauties of this is they have a financial incentive to not have that problem and be good at recruiting crossing guards, which is their business. At the end of the day, I hope they're better at it than we are, because if we have an intersection that can't be staffed, they will call us and we will send staff to do it, but we bill them at the rate of an officer or the parking person, which in both those cases are more dollars per hour than we're paying them to provide a guard at that intersection.
All right, well, that's comforting to hear, because I didn't want to have the taxpayers pick up a tab for another $44,000 and basically just have the same problems with just a different company managing it and so on.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I would hope that, like last time, that contract had a 60-day exit clause. So like with any other standard contract, that's what we exercised when we made our exit in 2012. But if, say, our partnership with the school district would not be able to be funded, or if, they would signal that partnership is not working, or that the service isn't working, we certainly would have that option within a notification time period to make that exit again if we would have to, if the service was subpar. The service really wasn't subpar before, it was just that the transition was a little bit clunky. Mary Ann?
Oh, I was just going to say that, we've had a relationship with the school district through our liaison officers for many, many years, and I don't think that, Matt or Ben can correct me, but we don't have like a formal contract on that relationship, and so they're reimbursing us for those officers' time spent in the school, and so, we've never had any collection issues with them or any problems whatsoever in that financial relationship.
Correct. And if the Finance Committee approves this request, my intention is to work with the City Attorney's Office and all city management services to get a draft contract written that addresses all the needs we can think of protecting our community. And then that contract would be provided to the council and brought back to the council in January to vote on. So
Sure.
it won't be, here are all the things the council wants us to put in the contract. We'll show you the contract at that point in time.
Sounds good. Dave? Dave and then Mike.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Matt. You've answered my questions, especially the one that I had with regards to would our current guards be able to transfer to the new employment status. But then I was also concerned, and you answered it, with regards to how would these individuals not qualify regarding the physical tests? Well, because most of them do come from retired occupations. But certainly you've answered that question too. I think that this new company would probably be staffed deeper with reserves that they could call upon, is my assumption, but
That's my hope. And I would be remiss if I didn't take a minute to tell you, we have great employees that are crossing guards, because
Yes.
to put it in perspective, they work an hour in the morning in whatever the weather is, and an hour in the afternoon with whatever the weather is. And it is not a high-paying job. So these individuals are out there because they care about our community, they care about kids, and they enjoy that interaction with the kids. And some of our staff have been crossing guards in the city of Wausau in excess of 30 years.
Yes.
So, I'm very grateful for the work that they do. It's unfortunate that the challenges in staffing that bring us to a point where we want to outsource it to a company that's what they do professionally. Because I will tell you, we have tried everything we can do to recruit. We have sent letters home to parents, to grandparents, to school paraprofessionals at the school, asking them if they'd like to extend their day by an hour because they work 7-hour days at the school. And we've had 0 takers. So we have recently staffed our crossing guards with Larry Yeager, our supervisor. He's got his brother, his cousin. He goes through his family tree to find people to fill that and asks them to work, and they do. And they're wonderful people. And I think the police department's intention is to continue to have a picnic with them annually and stay involved with the staff, regardless of who signs their checks.
and then my other questions were answered by Mr. Smith too, so
Okay.
thank you, Madam Chair.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right, yeah, and I think it's really important for us as the council to, closely look at these, whenever we're going to outsource an essential city service, because the city's name is on the line, when the crossing guards are interacting with the public on a daily basis. The background information, that I was able to read today was a little bit more enlightening, because it kind of jogged my memory of this vague notion of what happened 7 years ago, looking from the outside. But I guess my big question is that, so we've used them in the past in 2011, 2012. Hiccups aside, was the service they provided, do you feel it was a good service? It was better, or at least equal to what the police department is able to provide?
I didn't participate in that event, but I have spoken to individuals within our department that did deal with the crossing guards at that time and all city management services. And to everyone's memory, we had no issue with their performance and their staffing, and they're making sure they communicated well and ran a professional business. So from a performance standpoint, we didn't have any concerns with them whatsoever.
Okay, yeah, and it appears that the references that the other chiefs provided kind of echo that too, so that is comforting to hear.
Okay. Any additional questions for Matt? If not, is there a motion then to approve the concept of the outsourcing and direct the police department then to pursue those negotiations? Okay, motion by Lawrence, is there a second? Second by Nutting. Further Go ahead, Dennis. Okay, go ahead.
Since we're paying an extra $44,000, I'm sure the police department will monitor it carefully and make sure we get our $44,000 worth of benefit out of this, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Excellent. With that, if there's no further discussion or questions, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and hopefully we'll see that at council then probably the second Tuesday of January is kind of our target date. Item number 5 is discussion and possible action on approving the city's waiver of first right of refusal to purchase property at 7811 Stewart Avenue from PI of Schofield Incorporated to STS, consent to the assigned leases thereof, and the assignment of the development agreement between PI of Schofield Incorporated and Wausau Coded Enterprises 3 LLC. And you'll recall that when properties exist out in the business campus and those properties either come available or change hands, we have the right of first refusal to secure those properties, to make sure that they're used for the intended purpose. Unless we have a plan or the funds to repurchase those, we typically waive off that right, but it's a ministerial function that we still need to do either here or in ED. It looks like this property is, as you can see, changing over. Any questions on that agreement? Pretty standard language. Go ahead, Mike.
I believe we did reading through this, we did a right of first refusal for a previous transfer for this. So, okay.
We did, because we didn't need it then either.
Yeah.
And someone else did, and so this is that same type of thing.
Okay.
Questions? Go ahead, Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In this memo from the city attorney, there's a mention of a clawback of $20,000. That has been made, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. So now, I'm reading in one of the paragraphs, and it is, they're selling this property and then they're going to lease it back? I mean, it says here, I'll read the paragraph that I'm concerned about, or not concerned, just have a question on. The purchase and sale agreement dated November 14, 2019 between PI and STS, a California general partnership, reason for cause there, provides, among other things, for the sale of 7811 West Stewart Avenue to PI to STS for $2,995,225, and the assignment of PI of certain leases and assumptions by STS of those leases, which include the lease of 7811 Stewart Avenue from PI to JARP, and sublease, this is all written in lawyerese, so it's difficult to understand, JARP to Applied Fab and Manufacturing and Machining Company, for both dated August 30th, 2019, the development agreement to which the city as party requires consent of the city to an assignment of such agreement. So these people are buying it and then they're going to lease it right back to the other people?
We'll bring up the city attorney to answer that.
I don't have that file in front of me, Mr. Smith, but Wausau Coded, PI of Schofield, and Wausau entered into a three-party development agreement, as I recall. And Mr. Martins is right. Every time there's a transfer, not just with the first transfer of the property after it's improved, but with every transfer to an unrelated third party, it requires a waiver. It's going to show up on their title commitment, and so we need a certified resolution from the council showing that you've waived your right to repurchase that property with each successive conveyance. So Wausau Coded leased a portion of their property to PI of Schofield, and PI of Schofield, when they transferred it to them, then leased property to JARP. JARP was released from the development agreement upon the payment of the $20,000 clawback penalty. And I believe now that PI owns it and is going to transfer it to STS, Applied Fab is leasing it or subleasing it from PI. So because they're landlords, they have to transfer the leases to the new owner. And so that's as Lisa mentioned, the deed has deed restrictions attached to it that are recorded. That's why it shows up in the title commitment that they have to have proof that the city waived its right to repurchase it. And then the development agreement, all the obligations under that need to be assigned to the new owner, other than JARP. And the purchase agreement requires the assignment of the leases, the assignment and assumption of the leases by STS, because they will now step into the shoes of the landlord for Applied Fab, who will be the sublessee, the tenant.
STS will then actually be the owner of the property, and they'll be the landlord to these other groups. right?
Correct.
Okay.
A portion of the original Wausau coded property. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Right, and then this should again then stimulate industrial activity happening on the site, which is what we like to see. So is there a motion to waive our right of, waive our right of first refusal? Motion by Martin, second by Nutting. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries as well. Item number 6 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification increasing interest income and Public Works winter maintenance budget by $300,000. You've got some documentation in the packets on that as well. Does anyone have questions for Mary Ann on that item? If not, is there a motion then to approve that budget modification? Motion by Smith, second by Lawrence. Further discussion? Mike, go ahead.
Yep. I guess, so this $300,000, this is going to carry us through the end of the year, or?
Well, it's hard to really
But
be able to
that's-
predict that.
That's what's
because-
anticipated?
Yes.
Okay.
But if we have, continual snow,
Well, it's never-
then,
Don't say that.
yeah.
Well, the
Knock
Public
on
Works
wood.
Director is smiling in the back, so we're
Okay.
hoping that the snow stops. Dave, go ahead.
And this is routine, right? We've done this previously, I'm presuming.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly what the deficit was. They were in a deficit last year. I think our final reporting showed that they were in a deficit spending. So we were just trying to get ahead of the game this year and, make the transfer. So,
A little early.
yep.
Okay,
Very good, thank you.
Yep.
all right. With a motion and a second, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries as well. That is the last item on our agenda for tonight, so a motion to adjourn would be appropriate.
So moved.
Motion by Nutting, is there a second? Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one's ever opposed. We'll stand adjourned, and then City Council will convene in this chamber at 6:30. Thank you, everyone.